I think it should be measured by uh, economic status, like net worth, and especially debt. Um, I guess defined in a similar way.
Uh, by income of a family and if they're above or below the poverty line.
Lacking like the resources to live, I guess. Um,
Level of health.
As you can see, many Americans know that poverty exists, but can't clearly define it. That brings us to the question, what really is poverty, and how can we measure it in a society like the United States?
Poverty is the state of being deprived of economic stability to the point that it puts one below a certain standard of wellness.
In the community of experts, there is disagreement about what that standard of wellness is. Some experts believe that the standard of wellness is much higher than others. One expert, Robert Rector, believed that someone should not be considered impoverished unless they're severely struggling to meet their basic needs. In the study of poverty, one common term is FCSU, referring to food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Rector believed that unless somebody is severely lacking one or more of the concepts in FCSU, they should not be considered impoverished. Robert Rector explains that to the average American, the word poverty implies significant material deprivation, an inability to provide a family with adequate nutritious food, reasonable shelter, and clothing. Clearly, Rector believes that a family either must be starving or homeless in order to be considered impoverished. He provides statistics that many Americans still have air conditioning, refrigerators, and many other amenities, but are still considered impoverished. He believes that somebody should not be considered impoverished unless they lack severe necessities that they are unable to obtain.
We counter Rector's philosophy using the prevailing standards that air conditioning, TV, internet connection, and iPhones are necessary to employment and enabling modern human connection.
Another approach, on the contrary to Rector's, is the capabilities approach, first introduced by Amartya Sen. This approach talks about what a person could do if they wanted to. It's related to another approach called the functionings approach, which is a person's doings. Functionings are things like caloric intake and years of schooling that someone has chosen to do. People believe that capabilities are more effective than functionings because fasting is not the same thing as starving, but under the functionings approach, it's hard to see the line there. Things like capabilities include health, freedom, and other things like autonomy that a person should have the capability to possess. And it's helpful in defining poverty in that way because it focuses on much more of a qualitative way to approach poverty. Furthermore, an addition to the capabilities approach created by Martha Nussbaum was a list of 10 capabilities in an attempt to make it more measurable. These 10 were life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination, and thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, other species, play, and control over one's environment. We find it hard to use an approach like the capabilities approach because it's not very measurable at all, and we prefer something that's measurable and is able to apply to many different circumstances uniformly.
An example of capabilities versus functions is the scenario of Carrie and Jerry. This is Carrie, and this is Jerry. Carrie and Jerry consume the same minuscule amount of calories in a day. However, Carrie is fasting for religious reasons, whereas Jerry does not have access to the nutrients his body requires. Carrie's caloric shortage is a choice provided by the freedom to practice religion, while Jerry's is deprivation out of his control. Carrie has the capability to eat. Jerry does not have the capability to eat. But when solely looking at functions, both Carrie and Jerry are not eating, and thus are defined as impoverished. This is why capabilities are used to measure poverty rather than functions, although, as previously mentioned, it is difficult to quantify capabilities.
The U.S. currently measures poverty using the OPM, which compares pre-tax cash income against the threshold, which is determined as 3 times the cost of minimum food in a person's diet, as determined in 1963, and adjusting to family size and inflation. However, the OPM considers income, threshold, and family to estimate the approximate percentage of the population in poverty, but this excludes social factors. This is why we believe the SPM is a better use of measuring poverty. The SPM is an alternative measurement in the U.S. that includes social and economic state with government policy, thus making it more accurate.
We've created a hypothetical situation to illustrate the benefits of the SPM over the OPM. This is Susie and this is Bob. Susie lives in Boone, North Carolina and earns $13,000 a year. Susie owns a house and has many of the different resources that she needs. Susie receives $6,000 in benefits from SNAP every single year. SNAP benefits are not included in the OPM, but are included in the SPM, as they're near cash benefits. Bob lives in San Francisco, California, and makes $20,000 a year. Bob does not receive any SNAP benefits and is currently homeless. Under the OPM, Bob would not be considered to be in poverty, but under the SPM, it's much more obvious that Bob is struggling. It's important to recognize things like geographic location, near cash benefits, and also things like different non-discretionary costs, such as childcare, transportation to and from work, and things like that when assessing poverty. The OPM is very uniform and does not allow for many things to be related to circumstances, whereas the SPM is much more effective in understanding circumstances and different benefits that people receive while measuring poverty. A potential counterargument against the SPM is that it's still too restrictive on what it includes and what it does not include. And some believe that an approach to poverty needs to be based more off of what a person can do and something like capabilities. In conclusion, poverty is still a very complicated subject, and it's important to maintain respect for all individuals who are experiencing hardship. Poverty is not easy to define, and it's hard to say that one person is experiencing poverty and another is not. Respect is the most important thing when discussing a topic like this, and it's always important to understand who you're talking to and what the different circumstances are.
The variety of circumstances within poverty makes it a topic of dispute due to its indecisiveness as morally permissible or morally required. Through recognizing the flaws in perspective on poverty as well as within how it is measured, it is our hope that finding solutions to poverty surpasses being morally permissible and becomes a moral requirement for the greater good.